So we are in New Haven, Connecticut, and I am speaking to Assistant Principal Nicholas Perrone. I just want to thank you so much, Vice Principal Perrone, for meeting with me today and spending some time with the Motivate Me crew. You know, we're on a 50-state tour, and this is our last stop, State 50. So I'm really interested because, you know, I know you're an assistant principal, and I was a high school English teacher for 12 years. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about what your passion is and kind of how you're going about that. So tell everybody what it is you are so passionate about.
I would say the single thing that I'm passionate about are our kids, and tapping the potential that they have inside of them, finding what makes them tick, and really empowering them to reveal that on their own. From my experience, I've seen, and I work with inner city youth who have little opportunities available to them, and don't show very much worth that community has necessarily seen in them. And they come to school, if they come to school, there's just very little keeping them there, there's very little motivating them, because what they see is that if you get involved in other things, you can make a lot more money, a lot faster, and have no degree. So it's a constant battle between trying to convince them that education really is power, and that can bring them wealth if they so choose. Between that and other alternative family structure like gangs and affiliations like that, and other ways to make money that are not legal. So, you know, essentially, I'm trying to prevent the school to prison pipeline from continuing in any way that I can.
Where did this start for you?
My desire to want to be a school leader started actually with a principal that was the antecedent to, well, not the antecedent, but the opposite of what I envisioned should be a principal. And this particular leader led by fear and intimidation, and we teachers were regularly yelled at during meetings and whatnot, and it was a very sad and uncomfortable situation. And I decided at that point I wanted to be the opposite that this principal was, and so I started my path to school leadership at that point. At that time, I liked working with kids that were not working to their potential, so that had either special needs or were learning disabled or something along those lines. So I always enjoyed the challenge that represented to me, and especially kids with behavior problems, actually. I have lots of stories of different behaviors and, you know, different incidents that went on in my classroom or you know, near me. And, you know, most of the time was able to help them calm down and recenter and things like that. So I always enjoyed that part of it. And as time went on, when my wife and I moved up to Connecticut from Maryland, we centered on New Haven, and that's where I started my career here. And at that point, things started to shift. My understanding of what urban and inner city youth need, and working with families who are on welfare and receiving different government assistance. And so I started to see the reality of working in an inner city. And slowly but surely, I realized all of my past experiences of traveling abroad and just doing different things like that kind of all came together, and I saw the importance of the work that needs to be done here. And so, you know, the practical side of things is looking at where I was and what I was doing in my school, and with suspensions and things like that, and how my team was able to decrease in one particular school, the suspensions that we had. We went from 1 year having 87 suspensions down to 0. We had 3 or 4 years in a row where the suspensions were less than 10. And yet behaviors didn't go crazy, and we still had control of that part of it. But kids, I think, felt more comfortable and less stressed out. And so the way we did that was essentially by incorporating more of a trauma-informed approach to our practices and providing some supports for the kids who needed it. And that seemed to be the trick. And so all of those experiences kind of set me on the path of where I am now.
What do you think your greatest challenge is connecting with these kids?
My greatest challenge right now is actually being a white male, because it comes with it advantages and opportunities that the kids I work with don't know. And so it's difficult for me coming from, I came from a working middle class background. My father is an electrical contractor and worked very hard for our family. And so, I have experience with that and understanding how much work goes into being able to pay bills. But I also had a lot of things handed to me. And so my undergrad for college was paid for, and I went to a private school, and I never had to worry about that. I never had to worry about food on my table or water or heat or electric or anything being shut off. I never had those worries. My parents didn't drive new cars, but we went on vacations and we went around, different countries and things like that. So I had a lot of privilege. And so on one hand, that privilege helped me gain a better perspective on culture, by going to different countries. But on the other hand, I don't really know what it's like to be hungry. I don't really know what it's like to not be able to pay bills. And so that creates a bit of a roadblock with my connecting to a lot of the kids with whom I work. So I have some strategies to overcome that, but that's, I think, the biggest challenge. And I think the way that people view me walking into a school where there's a lot of kids of color and a lot of Hispanic kids is that there isn't an immediate cultural connection. And so I have to work very hard at building that.
How do you do that?
It takes time, and it's very dependent upon the person. I think with some kids, I can quickly gain a good rapport with them when they see my interactions. But with most kids, I have to prove myself, and I try to use humor in a way that works. I try to use my own personal connections to try to find some common ground, things that we're interested in. But I also, and I think going back to the humor, I also embrace some of the things that are different. There are obvious differences that we have, but when we get to deeper conversations and when I help kids work through problems that they may have, fights that they may get in, or issues at home or things like that, when they start to really see the true benefit of us working together well and getting through difficult situations, then we always come out of those experiences in a better way. So when kids know that they can get in trouble, and I'll work with them and we'll deal with that, and then we'll get through it and be better for it, then we've established a good rapport at that point. It's actually the kids that don't get in trouble, that I don't see very often, that it's more difficult for us to connect. And so, the only way that I can really do that is just being visible in the halls and saying good morning and making eye contact and, just trying to make those connections, working at those connections.
I know that this is a 24/7 battle and that you're super passionate about continuing to work at this. What do you think you've learned about yourself so far?
That's a good question. I've definitely learned that I can't do it alone in any sort of way. And any school leader who attempts to do it alone or take all the recognition is, number one, missing the point. And number two, is not going to create a school that is going to be sustainable. And so what I am attempting to do is not be the hero in any one place. I don't want to be the person that that is sort of the cause of all of the changes. What I want to do is empower the people around me to do what they want to do and what they feel is best, and to be treated as professionals, so that new ideas can be developed and we can build on those and brainstorm together and create things that I never would have imagined. That's more important to me because I've seen that you can create a more lasting and sustainable structure that way, and one that if I pick up and leave will continue.
Do you have a student who comes to mind when you think about, why you are passionate about this or how you have
Well,
gone about it?
Yes. So for me, the sort of next frontier that I've been working on for probably about 7 years has been incorporating a trauma-informed practice within schools and providing a therapeutic aspect to discipline as opposed to just a punitive aspect. And so this one student was actually expelled from one of the schools in New Haven and came to us. I don't exactly know how that worked out in terms of just leaving one school and coming to another, but in any case, he came to us. Very challenging kid to connect with. And I was immediately drawn to him because I saw red flags right away about his interacting with other students and the teachers. He was trying to make a name for himself right off the bat. We were a few months into the year, and as new students go, one of two things usually happen. They're usually either very shy and just fading into the background. They don't want to call attention to themselves, or they want to make a name for themselves right off the bat. And if that means getting into a fight or punching the most popular kid in the nose right off the bat just to be recognized or known, he fit into the latter. And so right off the bat, I was having conversations with him and learning about him. And we connected quickly. And I don't exactly know why. He didn't seem to connect with very many other people. And I got a whole long story, a whole long history of his life, and that he was one of 9 children, and that he had a cousin who was in the music industry and was making a lot of money and living in Manhattan, and another sibling who was, so a somewhat, what seemed like a fictional kind of story. And so I took it with a grain of salt. I didn't really believe what he was saying, but I just went with it. And I kind of took notes as our different interactions went on over the course of a few weeks. And eventually I learned that everything that he told me was legitimate. And that he shared things that he never shared with anybody. And his mom was even surprised that certain things were shared. And I wasn't trying to have any sort of a counseling session with him. I just let him speak. And he knew that he could come into my office and unload if he needed to. And especially what I wanted to do was create a system where he had the opportunity to let go of stress when he felt things were building up. So it would prevent him from attacking somebody. And as his story goes on, he was at my school for a period of probably about 4 months. And things were going well. Things were getting better and better. We were getting him enrolled in different things, and we were able to decrease the number of times where he was getting in trouble or mouthing off to a teacher or getting into a fight or whatever it was. And then this one day, he didn't take advantage of connecting with me first. And I found out that there was some sort of a threat that was made the day before, and somebody was planning on fighting him. And as a result, I then heard from somebody else that he may have brought in a weapon to defend himself with. And so I got that information quickly, and that was good because of the structure that we had of information sharing. And so when I went into his science room, there sitting out on the table was his knife. No one in the classroom noticed, and I do believe it was very much deliberate that he left it out. He wanted to be caught because he didn't want to have a confrontation. And so I quickly grabbed the knife and I asked him to come with me, brought him down to the principal's office at the time. And this was, unfortunately, in our system, you have to report offenses like that. And because he was on probation from the last incident at his previous school, there was nothing that we could do. It was going to result in his expulsion. And when it became pretty clear, when the principal just flat out said, I have to expel you, he then went into an episode that was unlike anything that I'd seen from him. He tried to run out of the building. I caught up to him, and I was one of the, it's called physical management trained people in the building. And so I put him in a protective hold. And that hold quickly became more of an embrace in which we were really both crying. And because from my perspective, I failed him. You know, from my perspective, I didn't catch it in time. For some reason, you know, I didn't get the information quick enough, or I didn't know that this threat was made the day before when it was made. And I know that I could have just reached out and given his mother a call and just said, listen, I heard something was going on, and I really want him to come to my room first thing in the morning, and I would have been able to talk him down from getting to that level. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. And so, you know, he was expelled, and that was really the last time that I saw him was there. And I don't have any sort of ending to the story because I really don't know what happened to him, but I know that likely it's not a good thing. And so that motivated me, you know, in two ways. Number one, I don't want to feel that way again, you know, and again, I don't want to take on the lion's share of that situation. So I want more people to share in that to help prevent that from happening. But I also need to create a sustainable way that we can work with kids, that all of us can work with kids that really need our help the most, and prevent them from feeling like they have to use a knife to defend themselves or something along those lines. So he definitely motivated me to want to get more into the trauma side of things.
You know what's really standing out for me is just how sometimes passion, right, can be so difficult, right? You know, usually in vast majority of people that we have spoken to about their passions have such a positive side.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, knowing, being in a school system, you know, what your challenge is and how strong your intentions are, but also feeling, you know, that you're passionate about this, but it can also be so extremely difficult, like
Mm-hmm.
hard, painful almost.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
It's all a balance. I mean, just yesterday, we graduated 4 students, you know, at the end of our summer school program that probably wouldn't have thought themselves that they were even going to graduate at all. And so, as part of that graduation, and I was very happy that this tradition has carried on. We asked the graduates to write speeches. And this is something that's afforded to summer school graduates that is not afforded to the typical graduate during the year. And the reason is that we wanted to take a summer graduation ceremony that is usually very small and somewhat transactional, and make it something that you know, produces some tears in some ways. In the everyday interactions, it's finding the humor in things, and just being able to laugh together and just make those connections. I think that's what helps us all carry on, and helps, I know, the teachers show up to our difficult school every day, and yeah, it's those relationships and the happiness and the smiles and the encouragement and the support, all of those types of things, and the car alarms. Those are really important too.
So Nicholas, the funny thing is about being on the road
Mm-hmm.
and doing interviews all over the place, we come across the funniest challenges, like how we were just in that beautiful studio of the architecture, his great studio, and then the alarm starts going off down
Right.
below us. So thank you so much for being flexible with us.
Absolutely.
But, you know, I wanted to ask you one more really important question before we stopped our conversation today. And I know that you're passionate about what you're doing and that you're working with kids every day. And I worked with a lot of kids that you're talking about, and I feel where you're at. And I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to address them right now. And I want to know what you would tell them about pursuing a passion.
So the first thing that comes to mind is that there's the cliche answer of figure out what you want to do without getting paid or without getting money for it, and do that and make that your lifelong goal. And for some reason that concept has never resonated with me, and it seems like a good idea, but I think it fails to recognize something in human nature that is more organic. So what I truly believe in is to tell kids to be open and embrace opportunity when it shows up. Because if we are looking for something specifically and we don't see it, then we're going to feel, or we're going to believe that we failed in some way. But if we're more open-ended in terms of what possibilities exist given what we have, or what things may be, then I think it leads to some creative pursuits. And by that I mean, when we go for a walk through a park, something may trigger what we want to do in that walk, and that could become a passion in that moment. And especially in this day and age, millennials will go through many more career changes and job changes than previous generations have ever had. And so they need to be able to weather the storm and be okay with change and really embrace it, so that if their passions change, then they can adapt, and they should feel encouraged and empowered to do so. And so I think that usually applies to the kids that I work with and when I talk to them, because a lot of them don't necessarily have much of an idea for what they want to do. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that, and for them to just get started and get going on what they on what they perceive to be their next step, and then let that evolve to what they're passionate about. And so, and that has, I guess, somewhat applied in my life. And I mean, one of the things that I did in college when I studied abroad was I was on semester at sea, and it gave me the opportunity to travel around the world on a ship and go to 10 different countries and have some of the most amazing experiences that I could imagine. And one of the places, it was Vietnam, one of the places I went to was an orphanage for kids who had hearing impairments and were mostly deaf. And I remember the group of other college students that I was with and a couple of the professors were interacting with them, and we quickly realized that we can interact with them better than any of the other Vietnamese people that we saw, because there was a language barrier with the Vietnamese speakers. And when we were interacting with the kids who couldn't hear, it was just all physical body language. And so we just had this great moment of creating ways to be competitive together. And so I started doing handstands, and because this one other little boy was doing handstands, and they just thought it was the funniest thing that I could do these handstands. And so we were just sort of going back and forth in that way. And so at the time, I had my current girlfriend, who was now my wife, but I was away from her during that whole trip, and that was the most difficult part of that trip. And so I knew that when I returned and she still wanted me and I still wanted her, that we were really destined to be together. And so that was a true test for our relationship. And she is adopted. So there was this thread that I think began at the orphanage and lasted throughout my relationship with my wife, and it led us to our understanding that we wanted to adopt ourselves. And so just recently, we adopted a 20-month-old from China. She's now 2.5. With the understanding that we want to give her opportunities that she never would have had. And at the same time, selfishly to incorporate her life and her culture and her personality into our family and make our family more robust and well-rounded, I guess is probably a better way to put it. So we allowed that opportunity to evolve, and we allowed that goal to come from our love for one another, and for our family, and with our biological children, and I think so in so doing, because we just let it take its course, and then we embraced it when it did come up. Our family is just it's right. it feels complete. It feels like she was supposed to be with us forever. And I look forward to our lives together, and I couldn't imagine us without her. So that's what it's about. Because we didn't have a prescribed plan when we got married, and we weren't saying that, well, we're going to have 2 biological children and then we're going to adopt a third. And we let opportunity present itself, and we took the opportunity when it did, and it allowed our goals and our family and our lives to evolve in a way that made it amazing and continues to make it amazing. So we're very blessed. And so what we're trying to instill in our children as well is to pass that on and to make sure that they are enjoying the things that they are passionate about and that are motivating them, whether it's dance for my oldest, and art and climbing for my son, and who knows what for our newest addition.
Well, and it seems like you're doing the same thing for the kids that you work with on a daily basis at school. So thank you so much for being a part of our road trip and for,
My pleasure.
Inspiring other people to live their passions. And I'm sure that you also raised a lot of awareness out there today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I talk to you, 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 and we love, and we hate, and we demonstrate, we try to relate. This is my breakthrough. Whoa. Said now, this my breakthrough. Whoa. Oh man, this my breakthrough.